Manufacturing in Britain has a long history of success, but in recent years it's become more challenging. Competition, both from Europe and the rest of the world, is intense, leaving only the most flexible and efficient companies in the UK.
British engineering is dual. There's one part of the engineering world that needs shaking up and has to move to the current century. There's another part that's state of the art. I've seen things in Britain that I've never seen anywhere else, especially about the 3D printing. Most people think that this only happens in plastics or like to make a toy or anything like that. But believe me, they print a lot more things than that, and I've seen that happening here in Britain.
I think manufacturing's changed beyond recognition over the last 15 to 20 years, and over the last 5 to 6 years in particular. Gone are the days when you could stack it high and sell it cheap. I think the market is demanding much more agility in the supply chain, much more service to the end customer, much more variability to the end customer.
It's very important to continue to invest in our manufacturing base. The UK is a powerhouse. We're a very technically competent and very able country, and it's important that we have the confidence to invest in manufacturing technology.
So UK manufacturing accounts for about 2.5 million people working in the sector, 11% of gross value added, half of all exports, 2/3 of all the research and development taking place in the country. And it's just very important for the stability of the country as a whole. Everything is manufactured. It lies beneath the entire economy. Tables and chairs, the food you eat, the clothes you wear. If there were no manufacturing sector in the UK, it's hard to imagine just having to import everything that we use and consume on a daily basis.
Technology is a key reason why Western manufacturers can remain competitive in the world market in both quantity and quality. Better process machines and advanced automation leads to a faster, more efficient production line without a sacrifice in quality. While this requires continued investment, it also builds long-term competitive advantage.
Over the past few years, there's been quite what I would call a big advancement in technology within manufacturing and automation systems, specifically around the areas of the ability of a computer to process data and the ability for sensors to now collect more data allows a lot more things to be put into context. So previously, where we may have looked at a machine that wasn't performing well in terms of the mechanics of it and looking for mechanical problems, now with the data that we're presented with, we can start to look for machine performance in context with other things. So for instance, the skill level of an operator or the quality of a raw ingredient compared to the quality of a similar raw ingredient, for instance. And all of that manifests itself within the automation environment. The sensing technology is also advanced immensely. If you think about how it's that kind of sensing technology that exists in something like an iPhone, that it's kind of the thing that keeps a smartphone smart, and the same is applicable to automation.
People who buy only standard machinery cannot make the edge on the machinery itself, because everybody's working with the same tool, and bespoke machinery gives you already that edge in productivity that otherwise you don't get, because everybody's working with the same machinery.
I think most companies nowadays recognise that the days of running databases, spreadsheets, red books, blue books and working from the pencil is no longer viable. It's no longer sustainable. People need one central location where all of their corporate information is stored, not merely from a security perspective, but more from a perspective of having one version of the truth.
It's commonly said that the UK excels at our research. We have some of the top universities in the world, and we have a lot of new discoveries, a lot of new inventions. But we struggle a little bit on the commercialization side of that, so on the D side of R&D. And that's been a historical problem in the UK that the country is trying to address, most notably, probably, through the organization of the High Value Manufacturing Catapult as part of the Catapult Centres in the UK, which is all about trying to help businesses not just innovate, but to commercialize their innovations, so to find funding and how to make a business out of their inventions. We still have a ways to go, and the APMG is interested in looking at that and seeing how we can do better. But it is something that we need to get better at because we do lag behind in terms of that commercialization of all of our discoveries.
In the modern world, there are a huge range of pressures on every industrial company. Today's economy expects cheaper products and faster than ever, while government regulations and environmental concerns pull resources in other directions. Any successful company needs to be able to rise to these challenges.
You can't be a profitable company if you're not efficient, and you can't be efficient or you can't increase your efficiency, which you need to do to be more productive, if you don't adopt your production methods. So it's a very simple example. You can't drill a hole in a piece of steel the way they've done it 100 or 200 years ago anymore. You could, technically you could, but that you have to do in a heritage center or something like that. You don't do that in a production company for the simple reason because everybody would be poor as dirt or wouldn't even have a job, because making a hole costs probably as much as nowadays making the whole part.
It's not easy to pinpoint single issue that manufacturers face these days. What we believe is that most companies have a pain of one type or another, and many businesses have many pains. It's not so easy to say collapse inventory cost anymore, or reduce the purchasing cost, or reduce landed costs. Equally, it's not as easy to say grow the business by selling more to more people. There is no one cap fits all how companies can improve their performance.
Having a real-time sense of production data is actually critical for manufacturing because unfortunately there is variability. So for instance, from batch to batch, it may be that your supplier of raw ingredients becomes different, and it may be that an operator has to respond differently to the way that his plant is behaving. And it's important that he knows about what he needs to do early so he can make a change without creating substandard product or without having to stop the line or slow the line down, because when you do that, essentially you're creating inefficiency.
Efficiency is central to running any successful business, and nowhere is that more true than in manufacturing. With every process repeated thousands of times, even saving seconds adds up to major improvements in workload. Understanding how you use resources throughout your production line is critical to delivering faster, leaner production.
The challenges that manufacturers find are many and varied, and there is no one cap fits all. I think one of the common threads we see within manufacturing businesses is the ability to trace and track at the factory floor level where components are, how those components are being manufactured, the progress and the ability to then forecast forward completion dates and end dates for when they'll be able to fulfill shipments to customers. Fairly consistent that people have a huge amount of difficulty in that area. They may not have the requisite master data to do that. They may not have the operational disciplines to track what the physical process and flow of material through the factory floor. I think the second challenge that people often face is going back some 30 years really to the core principles of MRP. We find all too often that companies haven't fully embraced the basic principles of material requirements planning and scheduling and production planning in particular.
Automation within manufacturing is critical. When you're producing anything at reasonable volume that has to have consistent quality, that have to be identical, that have to comply with regulations to do with health and safety and traceability and so on, then automation is a must.
We've come a long way since the 50s when the first NC systems were developed at MIT in the States. People ask, how much more can it be improved? Well, nobody knows, but that it can be improved is for sure. Because if people had given a negative answer thousands of years ago, we would still be stuck in that age. We would still be stuck in that time. So how much more can it be improved? Nobody knows, but a lot, that's for sure. So we are going to work more on accuracy in the future.
Over the past decade, interconnectivity has become a major focus for most manufacturers, centralizing information in one location. Access to information on an entire production line allows for immediate feedback on any changes and insight into problems before they occur.
Automation systems today are improving at a fast rate of knots. The thing that I would compare it to, or the notable thing that I would say, is it's taking generally less and less time for technology that you would maybe see in the home or in the office to land on the shop floor. So, for example, you may consider something like an iPad, which is something you may use on a train. It's quite common now to see that on a shop floor as well. Another area why it's important to understand this is to know how your production process runs when you take what is supposed to be the same product from supplier A and the same product from supplier B. So, for instance, if you're producing bacon, then you may take pigs from farmer A or you may take pigs from farmer B. The way that they behave, or the way that your production process behaves, could be totally different. So you need to be aware of what that change is going to be and how best to use those raw ingredients compared to those raw ingredients to get the best productivity. So awareness all the way down the supply chain is critical.
Innovation is mostly, in our area, is mostly raising productivity through delivering a higher quality product through your machines and increasing the speed of production, which is true generally through the years. That's not only the last few years, that's always been like that. And that's the search that we have to continue to do. It's a never-ending search to improve your quality, to improve your productivity, having more output of good quality products.
Technology can bring alive the manufacturing sector. So everything from the Internet of Things, for example, it's a big buzzword and we're seeing it in a lot of consumer devices at the moment, that the people who are running the machines from the manufacturer can see straight away if a machine's going out of tolerance. They can see straight away if there's a problem with the machine, if perhaps the bill of materials is incorrect and the machine's consuming more material than they expected, if it's consuming more energy than they expected. So this is building an ongoing financial analysis as the machine's running, which means they can take intervention early, but it also means that they get a really accurate picture and it can save labour time. So maybe one person can run several machines because the machine can automatically update the system with how many units it's made. A simple technology like that can really revolutionise how the shop floor works in manufacturing. So the big difference between data and business intelligence. So ERP systems are fantastic at collecting data. Every transaction that's done within the system creates a huge amount of data. The challenge for businesses is transforming that into business intelligence, and we've tried to do that over the last decade and we're really getting there now. And it's not about people going and drilling through the data and looking at what data's there. Business intelligence is more about having the systems flag up to you where the issues are and what's happening in the business. So a lot of the technology that's come through from the social media space is coming into play.
Unlike in other industries, solutions for many problems in manufacturing need to come from outside sources. In many cases, issues will have an answer, but finding the right one for your situation takes time and effort. Management teams need to stay up with technologies and expertise to ensure their companies remain at the top of their game.
Moving to an integrated system has challenges for businesses. When businesses start out, there's maybe a couple of people and they talk to each other all the time and it's very easy to share information. As businesses grow, you get more specialists in, they do more specialist roles, and you tend to form this silo mentality where one set of people, one function doesn't really communicate with another. When you put an integrated system in such as CISPRO ERP, there's one repository for the data and the business process flows right through the system and therefore through every function in the business. Any data has value to a business, But what's most important is the ability to transfer that data into information that can be used to provide decisions for. So my advice to any business is to look at the data that they've got and they think about how they can use that data in the decision-making process. Too many of our manufacturing businesses are data-rich and information poor. So they've got lots and lots of data. They know exactly what every machine does. They know exactly what every person does. They know the margin for every single product. They know the costs in detail, including kind of, bringing things in with duty and inputs and landed costs. They know the sales pattern and the cycle. They know the forecast demand. They've got really detailed data, but then don't make decisions based on that data. So, for example, they know that they don't make margin on a product, but they still sell that product because they see it in revenue terms and aren't thinking properly about what the information's saying.
Sharing knowledge of what goes on within manufacturing and the technology that's available to support manufacturing it is very important that we publicise this and make people aware of what can be and what is possible in order for manufacturers and investors to overcome this confidence barrier that they have in investing in the area. Manufacturing execution systems, for example, is largely an unadopted technology within the UK, and it's largely based on confidence. And so, bringing awareness to the technology is of key importance.
Efficiencies can be found in almost every company. For manufacturers where margins can be so small, it's critical to stay aware of every factor that can affect your bottom line. Avoiding complacency and waging a constant war on waste is key to remaining competitive.
We don't see the point in throwing things on a pile or throwing them or litter the streets. We can't stand the idea even. But here in Kingsland we emphasize this and we try to work hard on that so that people put the scrap in the right bin and things like that. Also other efficiencies, put out the light when you don't need it. When we first arrived here 3 years ago, all the machines, all the lights were always on. Day and night, weekend, holiday, always. I couldn't believe my eyes. That's not something that you should do. So we stopped that and now we work to a much more efficient way of production.
Sustainability and in terms of the triple bottom line is important to a lot of our manufacturing clients. So sustainability in environmental terms, but also sustainability in economic terms. Some of our customers might integrate their machines, capture information about energy usage, which can then be used to obviously things like carbon footprint calculations, and make sure that they're monitoring and measuring energy and trying to push it down. But also economic sustainability, so making sure that they understand where the business makes profit, how to reinvest that profit, how to get the best out of the assets that they've got on the shop floor and throughout the warehouse.
Manufacturers have a big responsibility to reduce their carbon footprint. They need to be consciously aware of the consequence of their actions. Factories can be a key contributor of greenhouse gases. And so with respect to that, they have a duty to be more efficient and to generate less waste and not consume energy needlessly. So it's of key importance. In terms of reducing energy for our clients, we do this in a number of ways. The first thing that we have to do is to be able to quantify the energy which is being used. So for instance, how much energy is consumed with making product A compared with product B. And then we also look to see how much energy is used in the daytime versus the nighttime, for instance. And then we start to look for other conditions. So, for example, when a line is stopped, are we still consuming energy? I've spent a lot of time in factories and it's quite common to see a line not actually producing anything, but conveyors still running and ovens still on. So bringing awareness and a sense of scale to that kind of waste is quite important. And usually simple housekeeping and simple activities and using automation can reduce the amount of energy that's consumed needlessly. And also altering the way in which operators think about what they do or the way a business thinks about how it manages its operations. So for example, you might come across a mixer which mid-cycle sits and waits for an operator to come and perform some kind of quality check. Now, for whatever reason, if that operator is busy, the mixer's still mixing, consuming energy and all the rest of it. And without having a sense of how much that energy costed, which was contributed to the time it took for the operator to do the check, having a sense of that can bring reasoning to either having additional operators, to investing in automation. So having some kind of visibility of how energy is consumed is key, and that's when the savings can start to be made.
A well-trained workforce is a major contributor to any business's success. You rely on your staff for success, and more than any other factor, they are responsible for your output. While it can be tempting to invest solely in new technologies, it's equally important to invest in your staff.
So the skills shortage is often given as probably the most difficult challenge facing UK manufacturing, and probably has been for several decades. It's not something very easily solvable in the short term. It comes back to attracting young people into manufacturing, into those types of careers. Industry can talk about themselves in a positive light about the kinds of career opportunities there are out there. And providing a very clear path from education into an engineering career, for example, into a manufacturing career. There has been a common complaint that the lack of solid careers advice in schools is to the detriment of the sector, where the default setting of a lot of parents as well as educators is the higher education route. Very few parents or educators would ever encourage girls to go into engineering or science or manufacturing, and that's a huge problem. And today we only have about 10% of all engineers in the country are women, and it's the lowest in all of the EU. But hopefully there will be a little bit of progress on that.
Training is a key ingredient of running a successful manufacturing operation. If you imagine within the manufacturing environment, people, processes, practices, they keep on changing. And as they do that, it's important to keep the operators and the staff fully trained so that they can get the best from the machinery and from the process. People move on, people retire. You have to hand that knowledge through the company. What's important is to get away from this notion of having heroes, these people that seem to know how to run machinery, and when they're not there, everything grinds to a halt. And training and demystifying all of that is a key ingredient, really.
I think it's very important to make engineering more accessible to females. I think there is no reason why this can't become a more balanced industry. At the moment, it's obviously very male-dominated. There's no reason why a woman cannot succeed in engineering and cannot come into an engineering company and find that although it may not have been an obvious choice, it's still a very valid choice. There's so much scope for opportunity, so much scope for growth. And I feel it's important that both engineering factories and maybe the education system promotes the fact that this is an environment where a woman can succeed. It's a valid option.
Perhaps more than any other industry, manufacturing's future will be determined by technology. With each generation of technology, production lines become more efficient and more work becomes automated. For companies who are willing to embrace change, the future for manufacturing is bright.
The future of manufacturing looks quite exciting when you consider the processing power that we now have at our fingertips with computerization and the ability to collect vast amounts of data. We obviously talk about terminology like big data and the Internet of Things, for example. And so as we look forward, I think we're going to have to contemplate a world where we're actually collecting data with respect to our raw ingredients. So if you're a cereal manufacturer, for example, you may be collecting raw data at the harvesting stage about your wheat and about your crops. And having that data is almost like some kind of electronic certification that comes with the raw materials will dictate how you set up your production line to get the best possible yield from that raw ingredient. So the future is quite exciting in terms of coupling up the intelligence from within your supply chain to actually how you manufacture. And the prospects are good if we have confidence and invest in the technology.
The designing is the motor of future sales and development. So you can't do, without the designing there's no heart in the industry. You have to push forward, always try to improve, step by step, not big steps, that's not necessarily small steps, and work on your continuous improvement, which we do on a daily basis here in Sheringham. So that's an important issue. There is improvement to make everywhere because it's never-ending story. We need to be careful not to be self-complacent and think that we are there and we can carry on as we were. I think Britain has done that too long. Not only Britain for that matter, it's in Europe the same problem. I think generally in the Western world we were complacent about ourselves. We thought that it would last forever, but we weren't innovative enough. And I think the Germans are the living proof of that because they didn't make that mistake. And they are now the top of the industrial world.
Servitization is more than just an upcoming trend, it's something that's happening already. And there are a lot of examples of that. So that you're not just making a product, selling it, and then forgetting about it. There's much more involvement with the consumer. So this is the era of mass customization where manufacturing companies will consult their potential buyers on what they want. They'll be able to do small production batches, and then they're going to maintain that relationship with their customer afterwards. They'll be able to monitor the product to make sure it's functioning properly. They'll be able to anticipate if there's a breakdown and then have it repaired before it actually becomes a productivity problem.
I think the future of manufacturing is going to prosper. I think we've seen over recent years the transfer of business initially out into the Eastern European states, and then obviously we saw it go to the Far East, and I think the Far East has provided with some great low-cost, high-volume output. I think businesses are increasingly coming back onshore to the UK. I think it's not particularly a Buy British campaign, but I think what companies around the world and certainly throughout Europe feel is that when you buy from UK manufacturers, you're buying premium quality, you're buying a good brand, you're buying innovation, you're buying long-term sustainability. And I think the future for manufacturing in the UK is actually quite rosy. And if the market conditions we're experiencing are anything to go by, I think we're in for a prosperous time for all concerned.